Hey everybody, welcome to another Intro to HTML video. In this video, I'm going to set us up to put together a final web page that has multiple columns and several different modules within it. And it's going to use floats, it's going to use all of the semantic markup we've been working on thus far. And also we're going to talk about translating the measurements and things from a comp into an actual HTML layout. We've seen comps before, or composite image. This is going to be a sketch almost of what a web page is going to look like. What you see here is a rough comp for what our final web page is going to look like. These aren't the actual colors that I would really use in the web page. There are no actual images in there. There's no placeholder text or anything like that. What this is, it's going to be a series of HTML elements that we're going to use and measurements for those HTML elements that we're going to use. If I zoom in, you're going to see that there's some detailed information in each of these areas. This whole green area in the background, this dark green, this is the width of the whole page. So if a graphic designer gave this to me, the file would have been 1024 pixels wide. And then you can see that I've got this component in here. This is like all of the info that's going to go on our web page. All right? It's a big wrapper. We've worked with wrappers before. And that wrapper is going to be 825 pixels wide. It's one long vertical column that's 825 pixels wide. Well, that wrapper is going to contain all of these components, things that we've seen before like header, nav. There's another component in here that's a little bit narrower. It's 706 pixels wide. And it's going to be my feature. The feature is going to contain an image, it's going to float left, and it's going to contain some paragraphs that are going to fill up the area on the right. I've got 65 pixel margins on either side. Down below here, I have my left column, which I'm calling main content. It's going to have 3 articles. Each article is going to have an H2 and 3 paragraphs. In the first article, there's going to be a figure that will be 170 pixels wide. Well, this column here, this main content column, is going to be 523 pixels wide in my comp. Okay? So that's my left column. My right column here is 302 pixels wide, and it also has a figure that takes up most of the space here. And that figure is going to have even margins on either side, and it's going to be 266 pixels wide. And it's called figure sidebar. And then I'm going to have an article with 3 paragraphs and an H2 below it. And down at the bottom, I'm going to have a footer that fills up the entire width of my wrapper. Okay? Well, these are absolute sizes. We've been working with relative sizes all along. In fact, I've told you to stay away from pixel sizes in almost all situations because pixel sizes, they're not flexible, they're not fluid. They don't get bigger and smaller as the page scales up and scales down in different browsers. So we want to translate these into relative units, and we're going to do that in a little bit. So I'm going to make a few videos here that's going to lead us from this point at the comp all the way up to a completed web page. The first video is just going to be us building our HTML markup, okay, and that's it. Usually when you work from a comp, there are several ways of going about this, but my recommended way of going about it is you look at the composite image, you look at all the required things that are in there, and then you start by mapping it out for what HTML elements you need to build those structures, and then you start building that HTML. You don't even start thinking about CSS yet at all. You just start getting your stack of HTML elements in there. So when I look at this, I see that everything is constrained to this width here, to 825 pixels wide. That tells me I probably have a wrapper div that's going to contain everything. So I'm going to go over to an HTML file. You're going to want to prepare a blank HTML document. I'm calling mine final multicolumn.html. It's got a style sheet in the head, it's got my title. I'm going to call this my final web page. And then it's got my body down here. We're going to start out by making a wrapper in the body. So I'm going to make a div, just like we normally do. Div ID is wrapper. Close that div. Now later on, this is going to get styled to be 825 pixels wide because that's the width that I want for my whole page. Let's go back to the comp. So I've got my wrapper that's going to contain that. Inside the wrapper, I have all these things. I have a header. I have a nav. I have this thing called feature, which is going to be a div called ID feature. I've got a div called ID main content. I've got a div called ID sidebar, and I've got a footer. So I'm going to get all those things in there. Start with my header because it is at the top. Now we'll look back at the comp in just a second here. Close my header. If we look at this, first thing in this wrapper is the header. So that's the first thing I'm going to put in the HTML. We're going to think of this comp as a vertical stack of things. And we're going to kind of think about it as we would read a book, top to bottom, left to right. So first thing was my header. Next thing in the stack is the nav. Next thing in the stack is the div ID feature. And then I come down to this row here, which contains two things. So this is on the left, this is on the right. Therefore, this will come first. And then the sidebar will come second. So main content comes first, sidebar comes second. So let's get that HTML marked up. Got my header. I'm going to go to nav. I had my feature. If I look back at the comp, you can see feature comes next, and it says div ID feature. Next thing in this stack, feature ends right here. So I've got my div ID main content. Next thing in the stack I had was sidebar, div ID sidebar. Go back to my comp. The next thing that I see here is my footer. That's at the very bottom. All right, so this is my basic framework to build up from that comp. I've got my wrapper, which contains everything. I've got my header, which is at the top. The nav came next, the feature third. Main content was my left column, so that comes first before sidebar. Sidebar came next, and then footer came last. If we look at the comp, you can see that we're working very general right now. We don't have any content in these sections. We just built the skeleton for our page. The next step would be to start getting the HTML structures where we're going to put the content in. So I know that I needed a header. I needed an H1 in my header. So I'm just going to put my H1 in there and put some placeholder text in. This will be my main headline. Get some space under there just so that I can clearly see where the header opens and closes. The nav is going to be just like any other nav that we've done, which is going to be a UL, a series of LIs with links in them. So LI, A, href, close A, close LI, put some content in here, page 2, copy this. I'm moving kind of fast here because this stuff right now should be routine by now. Page 3, page 4, page 5. All right, so I've got my nav with the UL, LIs, and links in them. My feature. We knew that we needed an image in here. We don't know what that image is going to be yet. We don't have it. And we also know that we were going to have some text content in here. There we go, and I'll fill it with some appropriate lorem ipsum in a little bit. But that's my feature. It's got an image. It's got my placeholder text in a paragraph. I'm going to look back at this and see if there's anything else I needed in there. I needed an H2. The image is going to be floated left, and the paragraph is going to fill the rest of it. So I needed an H2, and I got to decide where I want to put the H2. I think I want to put it above the text. Feature heading. All right, so I'm starting to flesh out the markup. I'm getting the things, the HTML structures that I know that I'm going to need inside these different areas based on what the comp says. Feature had an image, H2, and paragraphs. Main content. If we look at the comp, we know that our main content is going to need a figure, which is going to have an image and a fig caption. We know that the main content is going to have 3 articles. Each article is going to have an H2 and 3 paragraphs. So I'll get that in there. I'm going to start by making my articles. The articles, we know we needed an H2 at the top, just like we always have. We needed 3 paragraphs. And I know that I needed to have a figure inside of this one. But before I do that, I know my main content needed 3 articles. So I'm going to copy this whole thing and paste it 2 more times. So now my main content is going to contain 1 article, 2 articles, 3 articles that all have H2s and 3 paragraphs. If I look back at my comp, there was only 1 figure in the main content, and it showed up in the first article. It's going to be a little ways down. So what I'll probably do is I will probably put my figure right here, below the heading and above those paragraphs. And I can shift this around as I need to later on. I'll think about the placement of it later on. I just want to get this in there. And I know the figure is going to have an image and it's going to have a fig caption. Don't know what the image is going to be yet. We'll figure that out later. Going to have a fig caption. I'll make a paragraph in that fig caption. Now I've got my figure sorted out here. All right? Next, let's take a look at the comp. We've got all this sorted out. We know what's going to go in that main content. Now we'll figure out the sidebar. Div ID sidebar. We need to have a figure there as well. So I'm going to copy this figure, come down to my sidebar, and it said that it needed 1 article with 3 paragraphs and an H2. I think I'm going to put the figure, I'm going to put that at the very top inside of the article. Because normally we always put all content inside of articles or inside of some kind of structure. Open article, close article. I'm going to paste my figure in there. And if we go back to the comp, it said I needed 3 paragraphs and an H2. So the H2 is going to go at the top of the article, maybe right above the figure. Put some placeholder text in there, and then I needed 3 paragraphs below it. Okay, so now my sidebar is sorted out. Now I'll get my footer, and I'm just going to have a paragraph, some small text, as it says in the comp. And there we go. Let's look back at the comp and check our things. So it said we needed a header there's going to be an H1 in there. It said that there's going to be a nav with UL, LI, and 5 A's. I think I only put 4 A's in there. Let's double check. So I've got my header right here. It's got my H1. I got my nav with a UL and 4 LI's and A's. I wanted to have 5 of them. So I'll just put my 5th one in there. Go back to the comp. I have a feature that's going to have an H2, an image in there, and a paragraph. Let's see if I've got that. Okay, right below my nav closing, so nav opens, nav closes. I've got my feature right here. It's a div ID feature. I've got an image, I've got my H2, and I've got a paragraph. Excellent. Next thing we had was our main content. Div ID main content. It's going to have 3 articles. Each article with H2 and 3 paragraphs, and then I've got a figure in there. Let's see if I've got that. So I've got my main content with 1, 2, 3 articles. Each article is going to contain an H2 and 3 paragraphs, which I've got, as you can see. And then there was going to be my figure with an image and a fig caption. I've got that. Here's my figure with an image and a fig caption. Paragraph is going to hold the caption. Go back to the comp. Let's take a look at our right column here. It's called Sidebar. Div ID Sidebar has an article with 3 paragraphs and an H2. It also has a figure with an image and a fig caption. Did we get that? Here's my sidebar. It starts right after the main content closes. It's got an article. Article has H2 and 3 paragraphs. Then we've got our figure with an image in it, a fig caption below it, and a paragraph there. Then lastly, we've got our footer with a paragraph and some small text. And I've got that right here. Paragraph inside the footer with small text inside of it. Okay, so we've got all of our HTML sorted out for our web page that we're building from this comp. In the next video, I'm going to go about starting to style this thing. I'm going to start by styling probably the big overall structures. We're going to style the width of the wrapper, get those columns in there as we need them, get everything sort of sorted out. And then we'll start focusing more on details in another video after that. Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in for the following videos so you can wrap this all up.